Hey there! This video is about using the Cannular Pro canning machine from Keglin to can my beer. The reason I bought the Cannular Pro versus the original Cannular machine is because the Pro has a push-button semi-automatic function versus the manual lever on the original version of the machine. The original version requires pushing the lever backward and then forward to complete the seaming process, and I had a previous experience canning 100 cans from my niece's wedding reception using the original Cannular machine that my local homebrew store had in stock. Now, don't get me wrong, the original Cannular version is a nice machine. However, it's also nice to be able to push the button to activate the seaming process while I start filling another can. Also, the setup is easier with the Pro to change the height of the table by loosening the coupling and rotating the turntable support to raise or lower the table and get a nice tight fit against the chuck. We're currently in the planning stage of opening a nano brewery and tap room here in town, so the Cannular Pro was a good investment for canning individual beers in the tap room and keeping 4-packs in stock. As a side note, if you're a brewery in planning such as me, or you've recently started a brewery, I highly recommend attending the accelerated 4-day brewery workshop offered by Craft Beer and Brewing. Now, I didn't get paid to say that, unfortunately. But for me, the workshop was well worth the investment. And if you're interested, check out their website to find the next scheduled workshop and its location. Now, there's a bunch of videos out there about the Cannular Pro machine, such as opening the box, setting up the machine, adjusting the rollers, different chucks for the American versus European cans, the differences between the original machine and the Pro version, assembling the splash guard. By the way, I wish I had viewed that video before attempting to assemble the splash guard myself. So, I won't go into any of the topics covered by those other videos. Instead, I'll show you my canning station setup, and I'll give you a brief demonstration of my canning procedure using the Blickman beer gun and the Cannular Pro. Next, let's take a tour of my canning station. So, here's my Cannular canning station. I have this set up in my garage for two reasons. One, I ran out of room in my home brewery, and two, I try to make it a habit to discharge CO2 in a well-ventilated area. My home brewery is a small insulated air-conditioned room, which is why I have a CO2 meter and alarm set up in the room just in case there's a CO2 leak. Now, to feed my canning station with CO2 and beer, I have a pass-through from one of my kegerators in my home brewery to the canning station. The CO2 is controlled by a shut-off valve on my CO2 manifold, and the 6-foot beer line is connected to a liquid ball lock inside the kegerator. As you can see, the Blickman beer gun is securely mounted in PVC board, which won't rust or get mold if it gets wet. The beer gun is mounted so I can easily operate the CO2 and beer trigger with one hand. To the right of the beer gun, I have a spray bottle of Star San, and to the left, I have a spray bottle of Windex to clean up after the canning process. I have a hands-free auto soap dispenser, a small sink with cold water and a table drain, a cap and foam position where I install the lids, a basket for my sanitized cans and lids, and I have a Cannular Pro and splash guard mounted on a secure and level platform around chest high for easy access. I got most of these items on Amazon and from my local home improvement store. I'll put links in the description section of this video so you can easily find them. Next, let's sanitize the equipment. Now, before we get started, I always have a printed checklist for every process I do in the brewery. This makes accomplishing the process easier, and it avoids missing any steps. It also cuts down on the number of swear words echoing throughout the brewery. So the first step is to sanitize the items that I'll be using during the canning process, such as the Blickman beer gun, the beer line and ball lock, and the aluminum can and lid. To sanitize the beer gun, ball lock, and beer line, I use a small plastic bottle, a manual pressure sprayer, a piece of hose, and a ball lock, and a ball lock coupler. You can use a pressurized keg with Star San to sanitize your beer line and beer gun, but for For small jobs like this, it's much easier and quicker to use this simple method. By the way, these ball lock couplers, they come in handy if you want to connect two liquid ball locks together. So, are you ready to get started? I know I am. Okay, so I put my aluminum can and lid, or multiple cans and lids, into a bucket of Star San. I pour some Star San into a plastic bottle and then screw the bottle into the pressure sprayer. I spray the pressure sprayer's ball lock with Star San, which, in addition to sanitizing the connections, also makes connecting the ball lock and coupler easier. Next, I connect the beer gun ball lock to the coupler. I then pump pressure into the plastic bottle with the Star San, and I depress the trigger on the pump sprayer. I go to my canning station and compress the trigger on the Blickman beer gun, which starts the flow of Star San through the ball lock, beer line, and the beer gun. I'll keep the beer gun trigger compressed until the Star San stops flowing. Next, I'll sanitize the stem of the beer gun and the surrounding area. I remove the beer line ball lock from the desired keg. I then remove the beer gun's ball lock from the coupler, spray the keg's ball lock post with Star San, and then install the beer gun's ball lock onto the keg. I'll turn the beer gun's CO2 valve to the open position and then close the lid on my kegerator. Next, I'll remove the can and lid from the bucket of Star San and put the can and lid on a clean paper towel in the staging basket so they can drain. I'll compress the beer gun trigger to remove any Star San in the line, and I'll release it when the beer starts to flow out. Now, if I'm tapping a beer from a keg that's been dormant for a while, I'll pour myself a couple of pints to calm down that foaming action. Okay, I'll admit it, calms me down too. I usually keep my CO2 regulator for my beer taps at around 7 to 10 psi, which is too much pressure when I fill a can. So, I'll close my CO2 valve to the desired keg, pull up on the pressure release ring, lower my regulator to 0, turn the CO2 valve back to the open position, and then slowly open my regulator until I hear the CO2 going back into the keg. That'll be just enough pressure to fill the can with the beer gun without a lot of foam. Now, I know it sounds like a lot of steps, but remember, you want some foam at the top of the can so that when you put the lid on top of the foam, it will displace any oxygen. This is called capping on foam. But too much foam and you'll have a partially filled can. Too little foam and you'll have no headspace inside the can. Next, I'll switch the power on to the AC to DC converter. And then I'll depress the rear-facing button on the Cannular Pro. This activates the semi-automatic two-step seaming process when the forward-facing button is pressed. If the rear-facing button is not depressed, this will allow you to manually control the two-step seaming process as you press the forward-facing button. Lastly, I'll lift up the splash guard up out of the way so that I can put a can on the table. All right, let's can some beer. Yeah. I position the can so that the stem of the beer gun sits on the bottom of the can. I push the beer gun CO2 button for 3 seconds to create a blanket of CO2 on the bottom of the can. I compress the beer gun trigger and start filling the can with beer. Keeping the tip of the beer gun on the bottom will ensure the CO2 stays on top of the beer. When the foam is about to overflow out the top of the can, I'll release the beer gun trigger, lower the can, and put it into the cap on foam position. I then immediately place a lid on the can and press it down to push the top of the foam out of the can. I place the can on the Cannular Pro table, rotate the lever, and then lower the splash guard. I then push the forward-facing button to activate the two-step seaming process. I lift the splash guard up and rotate the lever to lower the sealed can. Lastly, I'll remove the sealed can from the Cannular Pro, rinse it off in the sink, and wipe it down. So cleaning the Cannular Pro canning station is easy. First I remove the table on the Cannular Pro and clean inside the grooves, and then I spray and wipe down the base. Next, I clean the inside of the splash guard, thoroughly wipe it down, and then rotate the splash guard closed. To clean my cap and foam station, I remove the overflow container on the bottom, dump it out into the sink, rinse it off, and then put it into the basket to dry. I then rinse off the grate, the insert, and the adapter coupling, and put them in the basket to dry. I hook up the pressure sprayer with Star Sand to the beer gun ball lock and repeat the steps to clean and sanitize the beer line and the Blickman beer gun. The next step on my checklist is to make sure to rotate the beer gun CO2 valve to the closed position. Lastly, I clean the beer gun stem and wipe down the surrounding area. Done! Well, that's it. I've been having a lot of fun canning my beers with the Cannular Pro. Usually, if we're going to have some people over, I'll sanitize everything beforehand and have the equipment ready. This avoids having to sanitize during the party, and it makes canning quicker and easier on demand. Or, I'll can my beers on tap ahead of time and have samples ready to give away. As always, if you have any comments or questions, let me know. How'd they get there? Cheers!